Good afternoon. Welcome. It's a great privilege to be able to welcome back General Hodges, Commander of US Army Europe, man very much in the front line of contemporary European security concerns. He's been here several times before, requires no introduction from me. He'll give a 15-minute presentation and then followed by questions, answers, and look forward to a full and frank discussion. So, General Hodges, thank you very much. Over to you.
So, Dean, I like your new facility here. It's your office was much too tidy, though. It's obvious you haven't really moved in yet. I'm sure that'll change. That'll change soon. So, I look forward to your questions. A couple of you I've had the privilege of working with before. You obviously are a glutton for punishment that you were willing to come back. But I look forward to taking on what it is you'd like to discuss to the extent of my expertise. I'd like to use this to update you on a couple of things that we're doing with regards to the United States contribution of assurance to deterrence. What was agreed at the NATO summit in Warsaw, where the alliance said it's time to transition from merely assuring allies of our commitment to actually deterring potential aggression. And I'll take you through basically an update specifically of what we've done. You'll have seen some of it already with the arrival of an armored brigade at Bremerhaven and then onward movement into Poland, as well as talk you through a couple of other things that are coming up about that. But part of the reason I'm here in the UK, I had the privilege on Thursday to visit 1st Battalion, the Rifles, out in Chepstow. Great commander there, Lieutenant Colonel Charlie Grist. We had served together in Izmir, Turkey for over a year. I met him. He was MA to the Deputy Commander of NATO's Land Command when I was the commander. The DCOM at the time was General Gordon Messenger. And I just was so impressed with Charlie Grist, one an exceptional officer, innovative thinking, understood the big picture, and also was a terrific at working in a multinational environment. 20-something nations inside this new headquarters in Izmir, Turkey, and you can just imagine plenty of pressures and so on, and Charlie just was a terrific officer at being able to sort of diffuse tense situations and help us get back on track. So anyway, so I committed to Charlie. I said, I really want to support you now as you move on to become a battalion commander, and finally got the chance this past weekend to see him after his battalion completed 18 months cumulative of deployment into Iraq, where his soldiers, men and women, were training Kurds and Iraqi soldiers, most of whom are employed in Mosul today. So the battalion touched almost 40,000, I believe, Kurdish and Iraqi soldiers that are in the fight in Mosul. So when you think about an impact by a relatively small group of great men and women helping train Iraqi soldiers, giving them confidence, teaching them counter-IED skills, other basic skills, helping them form organizations, what a real contribution and impact that British Land Forces have had in that very important fight that affects all of us here, of course, trying to recapture Mosul and destroy ISIL. And so at the Welcome Home Parade, I had the evening before, met a lot of the officers and families there, and then the following morning, Friday morning, on parade there to be able to touch so many of the soldiers. And I was impressed to see their local member of parliament, Mr. Harper, as well as the mayors from several surrounding communities and other liveries that were supporting the soldiers and families during the deployment, and then to look in the face of hundreds of great, really talented young men and women, almost all who had joined the Army after the war had started. So they had other choices, and they chose to step forward and serve in British Land Forces. And there was a real buzz there. They were confident, they were proud, and so much talent. And I wanted to share that with you. I mean, Chepstow is not exactly on the way to a lot of other places in the UK. Maybe you hadn't had a chance to be there. It was incredible. And I left there super invigorated and proud of our ally. And we depend so much on British Land Forces ourselves. I have 30,000 soldiers stationed in Europe. The mission today is the same as it was when we had 300,000 soldiers in Europe when I was a lieutenant about 100 years ago, to deter the Soviet Union, to assure allies, to protect U.S. strategic interests. Today, our 30,000 are here to deter Russia, assure our allies, and protect U.S. strategic interests. So our task is to make 30,000 look and feel like 300,000. And a big part of that is reliance on allies. Deterrence is about having capability. It's about demonstrating that capability. It's about demonstrating the will to use that capability. And so that's what you're kind of seeing underway now with the deployment of an Armored Brigade combat team. It's here for 9 months. This was announced by former Secretary of Defense Carter last year. And we've had troops coming back and forth, but now it's going to be a continuous presence of rotational forces. So the brigade that landed at Bremerhaven began debarking on the 6th of January, came from Fort Carson, Colorado. All the equipment came on 3 ships, and we moved it. We call it on the clock. How fast can we get it across northern Germany into an assembly area in Poland? Kind of like we used to do when we would do the reforger exercises, where we were practiced at doing this. Well, it's been a long time since we had actually done this. And so we moved them as quickly as we could, and it took about 2 weeks from the ramp going down until the entire formation had moved by rail and highway, and the soldiers had flown from Fort Carson, Colorado, and married up in western Poland in a series of camps and assembly areas, and gone through all the preparation necessary to be ready to fight. That's an important benchmark for us, because now political leaders can understand how long it takes to be able to assemble a force like that if we wanted to be able to send a message, for example, to preempt a crisis from happening. So that's one piece of what we're doing. And this Armored Brigade combat team, the pointy end of that team is 87 tanks. All right, and then of course there's the hundreds of other armored vehicles, howitzers, infantry fighting vehicles, logistics vehicles, engineers, and so on, and about 3,700 soldiers that man all this equipment. That's the brigade. They'll be here for 9 months in Europe. In just a couple of weeks, they'll disperse out to training areas where they'll be for the next 9 months up in the Baltics, in Romania, Bulgaria, and Hungary. One battalion will go back to Germany, to Grafenwehr, but the center of gravity will kind of remain in western Poland. We'll mass the BCT a couple of times over the course of the 9 months to practice being able to do that. And then they'll be replaced in the early fall, by another brigade coming from the States. So what we call a heel-to-toe rotation. So there's no gap. There'll be overlap for a few weeks, but no gap. And then 9 months later, another brigade, and so on. And this goes to the construct of speed, and speed being an essential element of deterrence. Because we can have our formations, but if we can't get them there in time, then they won't be much of a tool or an option for our political leaders to send a signal before a crisis happens. So when we talk about speed, I'm talking about 3 kinds of speed. Speed of recognition, what is happening. You know, weeks after the Russian little green men landed in Crimea, there were still good, smart, well-intentioned people that could not bring themselves to say, those are Russian soldiers. You know, just because they didn't have their patch on their shoulder. Well, those are not Russian soldiers, because they don't have the patch on their shoulder. So recognizing the political decisions that would have to be made to do things, the speed of recognition of what's happening is going to be critical. And unlike when I went to Afghanistan to serve in a British headquarters in RC South in Kandahar, where I knew for a year where I was going, that I was going to fall in on existing infrastructure, existing communication, everything was there. If there's ever a crisis in Eastern Europe, and I don't think it's imminent. In fact, I'd say it's unlikely, and we want to keep it unlikely. But if there was a crisis, we would probably have days, not even weeks, days of unambiguous warning. So clearly, the sooner you can recognize what looks like it may be happening, then the sooner you can start doing things to prevent it from happening. So that speed of recognition, everything from human intelligence all the way up to satellite and everything in between necessary. And then, of course, that's got to be put in a compelling way to our political leaders to authorize movements, because again, there will be really good, smart people that will say, you know, if we move, if we draw ammunition, that could be provocative. And of course, nobody wants a miscalculation. So figuring out how do you recognize what might be happening, getting the necessary decisions, so speed of decision. I mean, I can't on my own say, you know what, I don't like what I'm seeing. I'm going to roll out all my vehicles, upload them with ammunition, and have them move up to the border. Obviously, that's not within my authority, nor should it be. But somebody's got to authorize those things if we want to be in place fast enough to prevent a crisis. So those are the kind of things we practice. And then the third aspect of speed is the one I've been talking about the most, speed of assembly. How fast can you get multinational formations together? And that means you've got to be interoperable. If you're showing up within days, and you're going to have American soldiers under British leadership, under Polish leadership, under German leadership, our communication systems have got to work together. We've got to be able to support each other logistically with indirect fires. Our aircraft have got to be able to talk to each other in a secure way that cannot be intercepted or jammed. And the capability that we have seen the Russians demonstrate in Ukraine is like nothing we've ever had to deal with before. And so if we're going to be effective, we've got to be interoperable in a secure way, both in terms of FM communications, what we call digital fires. How fast can you process fire missions? Say a Polish observer at a British artillery headquarters and American guns, how fast can you do that in a way that cannot be intercepted or jammed by an adversary? You have to practice that, because everybody's got different systems. So you got to practice that and get the policies right for that. So that's what we're working on with speed of assembly. The Russians have freedom of movement on interior lines, meaning they can go anywhere that they need to, and they've got the rail and air network necessary to do that sort of thing. The SNAP exercises, you've seen them demonstrate over the last couple of years, the ability to move a lot of stuff real fast. I was a little bit naive. I assumed we'd be able to do the same thing in Europe. But actually, you can't just roll from one country to another, even if there are EU countries or NATO countries. There's still some challenges to that sort of rapid movement. Fortunately, our alliance has recognized this. NATO is working on this. We're working on it as well bilaterally with each of the countries to be able to facilitate that. British Land Forces just did a great test the other day. I think you're probably aware that 5 armored vehicles moved through the channel to demonstrate that, yes, you can in fact do it. It was drawn up that way, but you actually still have to do it to confirm that you can do it and learn what needs to be done in order to do that. So we've talked about the arrival of the Armor Brigade. The next piece that's coming is in March. We have an aviation brigade, combat aviation brigade, coming from the States out of Fort Drum, New York. Then they will come for 9 months. Some decisions were made here over the last 2, 3, 4 years. I probably would have made the same decisions if faced with the same information. U.S. Army Europe and U.S. Air Force Europe and U.S. Navy Europe have been bill payers because, you know, everybody saw and hoped that Russia was going to be a partner, so you didn't need to maintain a big footprint, if you will, on the ground in Europe, just like UK has decided to bring troops out of Paderborn and bring them back to the island. My aviation brigade was one of the big bill payers. So it was eviscerated. Now, of course, the Army is going to spend the money to bring aviation brigade back into Europe on a rotational basis. So you talk about willingness, the amount of money we're going to spend to bring over aviation brigade for 9 months, replaced by another with their equipment and so on, demonstrates our will and commitment, which is an essential part of deterrence. So that aviation brigade will come in through Riga, Thessaloniki, and Bremerhaven. So not just one port, but actually come in through 3 ports, because they're headed, the aviation brigade will be dispersed into Romania, Bulgaria, Baltics, and back in Germany and in Poland. The next piece is EFP, Enhanced Forward Presence. At the NATO summit at Warsaw, when the alliance came out and said we have to transition from assurance to deterrence, decision was made to establish something called EFP, Enhanced Forward Presence Battalions. So the UK-led battle group will go into Estonia, a Canadian-led battle group goes into Latvia, a German-led battle group goes into Lithuania, and then an American-led battle group will go into Poland. So I'm responsible for providing that battalion in Poland. We are going to use our Stryker Regiment, 2nd Cavalry Regiment, based in Vilseck, Germany, to provide that battle group. It will depart Vilseck, one battalion will depart Vilseck on about the 25th of March and move by convoy up into Orzysz, Poland, northeast Poland. That's where that'll be their home for the next 6 months. And then they'll be replaced for its follow-on 6 months by another battalion out of the same regiment, and so on. And I assume that this mission will go on for the next, I mean, I have a 5-year outlook on everything, mainly because that's our budget cycle. And as long as I see dollars showing up in that, I'm confident that that's what we're going to do. So I've got a good five-year outlook. And I think the commitment of the alliance, is long-term as well. We'll have a British company, Wheeled Light Armored Vehicle Company, will be part of the American battalion that deploys. And that battalion will be under Polish brigade command up in northeastern Poland. And this is kind of the framework for the enhanced forward presence. The alliance said these need to be multinational formations, but not like a cheese ball with a bunch of flags in it, but actual warfighting formations built around a framework nation. So the British-led battle group, for example, will be built around a British headquarters, British combat power, but it'll also have, I think, French, Danish components to it as well. Just like the German battle group will be built around a German headquarters and German combat formation, but it'll also probably have Norwegian and Dutch components in it as well. Those units will be, it's not a training deployment, it's an actual mission to provide deterrence, to demonstrate capability, and also the commitment of the alliance, not just individual countries that could maybe be picked off one way, but actually multinational formations. And then the final component of our transition to deterrence is the establishment of APS, Army Preposition Stocks, preposition equipment. Some of you probably remember when we used to have what we called POMCUS, P-O-M-C-U-S, which we had the equipment for 2 or 3 divisions on the ground, and then each year we would come across, draw the equipment, exercise it. That was Reforger. 3 years after the last American tank left Europe, and we had no tanks, 0. For the first time in 6 decades, there was not an American tank in Europe except a museum piece. And now we have the rotational brigade, and we're going to have all the equipment for an armored division will be on the ground in this pre-positioned storage. So we'll have a brigade of equipment in Eygelshoven, Netherlands. We just started inducting that back in the first week of December. We'll have a site in Zoetendaal, Belgium. We have received from the UK the former British site at Duelman in Germany, where we'll put a brigade there. I think our fires brigade is going to go there. We're using Miesau, Germany, which is an American depot already, and eventually we'll put one in Poland somewhere over the next 2 or 3 years, I believe. So that's part of the deterrence effort as well. So rotational armor brigade, rotational aviation, EFP, preposition stocks, and then of course pretty comprehensive exercise program, which you've already seen some of it, and we will be doing that throughout 2017. I think I already addressed a little bit my reliance on British Land Forces, not just the company that's in our EFP battalion, but UK is providing the VJTF, the Very High Readiness Joint Task Force. You're the core of the VJTF this year. So soldiers out of 3rd UK Division, 20 Brigade have been working very hard, practicing to carry out their role, speed of assembly, as part of NATO's deterrent effort. The British contribution of EFP, your own battle group, obviously that's going to be a very important high visibility role for British contribution. And then I specifically rely on British heavy equipment transport, what we call a HET. This is the very large tractor trailer that you put a tank on the back of the trailer so you can go down highways. The American version of the HET only has 6 axles, which means when you put a 72-ton or 75-ton Abrams tank on it, it exceeds the per axle weight restrictions of European highways. So we've leased 18 of these wonderful vehicles from the UK, which have 7 axles, and they actually also are narrower, better for European roads. So it significantly increased my mobility because UK leased us these 18 HETs. And what a great contribution. Maybe that's another way for British Land Forces to keep contributing. I don't imagine tanks getting lighter anytime in the next 30 years. So very important to us. And then the best bridge in the world is the German-British M3 bridge. There's a German engineer battalion based in Minden, Germany. One company of that battalion is actually British Reserve Engineer Company. And it's exceptional. We did an exercise in Poland back in June, crossed the Vistula River, 395 meters in 35 minutes. That bridge was up. That's lightning speed from the time the first piece of the bridge entered the water till when a tank proofed it going across. It's a phenomenal capability that the British and German land forces have together. So I think I'll probably stop there, and if I look forward to any questions that any of you might have.
Thank you, General.
You get back in uniform here. I'm not a little green man.
Any takers? That's your first question. Name and organisation, please.
James Robbins, diplomatic correspondent of the BBC. Can I just ask you a couple of questions, General? One about the difference that you've observed during your military career in German contribution and willingness, because that's obviously a significant military and political factor. Mm-hmm. And I wonder if you could just tell us a bit about how that seems to you in terms of them going onto a forward foot and what difference that makes to deterrence. And the other is about persuading more European countries to meet the 2%. Is that more symbolic than real, because ultimately there are only a certain number of war-fighting countries in Western Europe you can join with as partners? Are they just flags in a bowl of flowers even if they put the 2% in, or is there something more than that?
Thank you. So Lieutenant Hodges showed up in Garlstedt, Germany in March 1981, and he had a huge American Army, British Army, German Army. I mean, it was corps. Even had a Belgian and Dutch divisions. So that was a different time. We don't need that same sort of size, obviously, anymore. Plus, it's obviously not affordable. But you needed certain capability. And over the last 10, 15 years, as our focus shifted to the Middle East, we all saw Russia was going to be a partner. Everybody, including my own country, began to reduce size. You remember the peace dividend, and we all sent away capability. Well, the Germans obviously did that in a big way as well. So I've seen it at the peak or at a very high level, and then I saw it drop dramatically where units were not filled. The readiness level was not what we all took for granted almost from the Bundeswehr. What I see now, thankfully, in the last year and a half, is they're back serious about readiness, about capabilities. They've repurchased, I think it was about 100 Leopard tanks that they had divested. Germany is providing leadership for 3 of the 9 corps of the NATO force structure. Multinational Corps Northeast in Szczecin, Poland, which is really important for deterrence. The German Netherlands Corps, and then in the Euro Corps. German forces, or German military is the 3rd largest contributor in Afghanistan. They're training Peshmerga in northern Iraq. They're providing leadership and capability down in northern Africa. So a lot of different places. And the current German Army Chief, Jörg Vollmer, was an exceptional soldier, and he has got the Army focused back on readiness again. Minister von der Leyen has gotten additional resources. so that they can fill out the units, that you don't have units that are part hollow, or maybe people are sharing equipment, that sort of thing. And so their troop increases are designed to fill out units, not create new units, and which, by the way, is the exact same thing the United States Army is going to do. If we have growth, the first priority will be to fill out units versus having multiple formations, which won't necessarily be as effective. So I'm very happy with what I see of the German Army. I have a German Chief of Staff in this U.S. Army headquarters, which we've worked very hard to improve transparency with our host nation, and to make sure we had the trust and confidence of the German government, German people, about what U.S. forces were doing there. And having a German Chief of Staff and a close relationship like we do with the Bundeswehr has gone a long way towards doing that. All 28 countries agreed at Wales that they would meet their target of 2% GDP within 10 years. We are at 5 countries right now, but several countries, and everybody focuses on that, but there actually are quite a few countries that are at 1.8, 1.9, and moving in the right direction. So I think leadership of the Secretary General, both current and previous, and I'm proud of my country too, to continue to expect allies to fulfill their obligation. I don't want to overstate this or make it sound better than it is, but it absolutely is moving in the right direction. Several countries have announced that within the next 2 or 3 years they'll be there. So I'm satisfied with the direction of travel. Clearly UK, if UK had not held fast on that, then nobody else would have felt any pressure to do it. So thankful that UK has done that.
Gentleman there, name and organisation.
General Tom Newton-Dunn from The Sun. What is your assessment on what would happen to the level of threat from Russia if the US was to either decrease its presence, footfall in Europe, or withdraw altogether?
So I believe that the Russians only respect strength. I mean, this is not about President Putin, and that if there's vulnerability, if there's weakness, if there's openings, then they will then they will look for, they'll exploit that. I don't mean like an invasion, just outright invasion. I don't mean something like that, but I mean in terms of, you know, they've always believed that they were entitled to some sort of a sphere, and that so that the people in Poland or Ukraine or Lithuania, whoever who didn't want to be part of that sphere, that was not their choice. And so I think that the United States has been here to help be a part of the most successful alliance in the history of the world, to ensure that those nations that wanted to be free to have that could in fact do that. You know, the Ukrainians looked over and they saw their Polish neighbors and how the standard of living had gone up by joining the West. And the Ukrainians, they wanted that. They wanted to be part of the West. And obviously, Russia, that's the last thing Russia wants. So they invade Crimea, they invade the rest of Ukraine, or the eastern Ukraine as well. So, or support the separatists in the Donbass. So I think if the United States was not there, participating, contributing to stability and security in Europe there, that the threat would be more significant. Although hopefully other countries would in fact step forward for the same reason.
Just as a quick follow-up, in which case the talk coming out of the administration now of potentially calling NATO obsolete, not being willing to protect borders as the US was previously, this must be quite a concern for the West.
So I am a pretty simple infantry soldier. Way down in the chain, I'll say that the United States has been a loyal, active leader and member of the most successful alliance in the history of the world since the very beginning. I think we'll always be that. I think that our stability and security is tied to stability and security in Europe. But for sure, the organizations, the processes, the things that we do have got to work hard to be relevant to the threats that are around us. Article 5 says an armed attack on all. It doesn't say an armed Russian attack. It says an armed attack. Have we kept up with those things? I think those are fair questions that all serious people in the alliance are working very hard to address.
Gentleman there, name and organisation.
Thank you, Neil Brown, CQS. General, thank you. Can I ask about Turkey? You mentioned Izmir.
Sure.
Can I ask what differences you have seen in terms of Turkish participation in NATO since the coup in July, and also in terms of the implications for NATO's presence in Turkey?
Well, I had the great privilege to serve in Turkey for 2 years in Izmir when NATO established a new land command there. And in Izmir, what an incredible city, a great country. Turkey's been such an important ally for us all since it joined in 1952. In fact, there's been a NATO headquarters in Izmir since 1952. The most continuous, longest time of a NATO headquarters in any country except for Naples. Only Naples has exceeded it. So there's, despite the different governments that have been in Turkey, whether it was coup or military or otherwise, there's always been a NATO headquarters there. It's been very important, and I hope and expect that will continue. The geography, I mean, a quick look at the map tells you how important it is. The capability of the Turkish military is substantial, very professional. But the attempted coup was it's terrible. I mean, terrible in so many different ways. We're democratically elected government. None of us supports military going against a democratically elected government inside the alliance. I've had the chance to talk with some very senior Turkish military leaders since that time, and they've got to work very hard. They are working hard to reestablish trust inside the military with the departure of thousands of officers, particularly those who had a lot of experience in the alliance, for example. They're going to work hard to reestablish that, as well as inside their own country. And I think they're doing that by what you see, the fighting that they're doing in Syria. I mean, they're suffering a lot of casualties in Syria, as well as fighting extremist terrorists inside their own country. I mean, they're just about hardly a week passes that you don't hear about police or soldiers being killed, blown up, terrorist attacks inside Turkey. So I think they see themselves as fighting three terrorist organizations: ISIL, Kurdish extremists, and then the Gulenists. That's how they characterize it. I think that Turkey knows that their economic future is tied to the West. And they clearly depend on Russia as well, and other parts of the world. But prosperity is going to be tied to the West. And so I think eventually we're going to find that right level to get back to that.
Gentleman at the back. Sorry, somebody's hand was up. Maybe it wasn't a gentleman. Sorry.
Hello,
Name
yes.
and organisation.
Mera Dushevsky, I write for The Independent and other newspapers. The last time I saw a map, like your enhanced forward presence map, was 3 months ago in Russia. But there was a difference about it, which was that out of each of the flags was an enormous arrow making its way towards Russian territory. And the headline on it said, "NATO is rushing towards Russia." Can you say what measures are being taken to prevent Russia misinterpreting this positioning? Thank you.
Thanks, Mary. I'd love to get a copy of that map, by the way. That would really be that'd be a pretty cool. I'd like to see that. While the 700 cavalrymen of the 2nd Squadron, 2nd Cavalry Regiment have extremely large Stetson hats, that's their sort of a trademark. I don't think they'll make much of a big giant arrow as they rush towards Orzic, Poland. But what you've highlighted is are two key aspects of this. Number one, the Russian narrative of what we're doing, what this is all about. I'm not sure what color arrow they would use going into Crimea or into the Donbass region, or how large that arrow would be, or the arrow that they showed going into Abkhazia and South Ossetia, where there are still, by the way, 10,000 Russian soldiers in Georgia, which is about 3 times the number of NATO soldiers that will be distributed across the 4 EFP battle groups. So there is this narrative that somehow we are a threat to this great country of Russia with 4 battle groups. Secondly, though, and it's a fair point, I think what separates how the West, how our great alliance and how the West does things compared to how Russian Federation does things is through transparency. I have no illusion that no matter how many Pulitzer Prize winning journalists are in this room right now, that one single Russian will read what you say and be, well, you know what, maybe they're not really a threat after all, or that they'll be influenced. I'm not attempting to shape how they think, but we do need populations in Germany, France, Italy, UK, United States, Poland, Lithuania, etc., to understand exactly what it is we're doing, to be confident in what we're doing, and to stick with it. Nobody wants a miscalculation, and I think the best way to prevent a miscalculation is through total transparency. So when our Stryker squadron moves from Vilseck, Germany up into Orzic, there will be journalists invited to participate in that, just like we had journalists with us in the first Dragoon ride, on every exercise that we do. That sort of transparency of legislators being out there, community leaders, to see exactly what we're doing. And of course, we have Russian inspectors. We just had a Russian inspection team visit our headquarters in Stuttgart, Germany, or one of our garrisons in Stuttgart, Germany. We had them visit our exercise in Anaconda in Poland back in June. We've had them visit Vilseck, Hohenfels. I mean, it's a lot. And I'd love to have a Russian officer ride around the back of my vehicle all day long. Number one, it'd be a fascinating conversation, but it also would add to that transparency, which I think helps lower the temperature. So that's, compliance with Vienna protocols on size exercises, informing them is how I think we avoid any sort of miscalculation. I do get asked occasionally, hey, don't you think this big exercise is being provocative? And so I'll talk about transparency. Then I'll ask, how many of you have ever been invited to a Russian exercise? And after about 10 times, not one hand has ever gone up. So the Russian snap exercises are the ones that scare people because a large number of troops shows up across the border from Estonia, and nobody knows about it till after it's underway.
Gentleman there. Name and organisation.
Jonathan Beale, BBC Defence Correspondent General. I just wondered, how do you think President Putin views the political ruptures that have occurred both in Europe and in your country too, the sort of the phenomena that we've seen without being specific? Do you think he does view this as an opportunity to go for the alliance? And I just wondered how those political changes also have they made your job a little more difficult, do you think?
Well, Jonathan, I'm sure if he reads your reports, he'll have absolute clarity on everything. It's crisp reading, and I don't accept your use of the term rupture. I mean, we've just conducted a peaceful transition of power in the United States of America. And I mean that completely sincerely. So I disagree with the use of the word rupture, but I take your point. I am sure that the President Putin's objective is, or desire is, to see the alliance come apart and to see the EU come apart. Those are the two institutions that I think fear is not the right word, but resents the most because of what they represent. And it's that order that was established after World War II. It's what he hates. And the fact that with the dissolution of the Soviet Union, I mean, he's talked about the worst thing of the 20th century, worse than World War II, was the collapse of the Soviet Union, according to the president of the Russian Federation. So I think he hopes to see our great alliance and the EU fail to keep up with the times. Yeah.
One more question. Anyone?
Warwick Light for Policy Exchange. Could you give us a glimpse of your perception of the Russian Federation's armed forces and its strengths and weaknesses? A bit of compare and contrast compared with where we would have been in the mid-1980s versus NATO.
No, thanks, Warren. So it was a common malady in the 80s, and it is today, to project the Russians as being, or the Soviets as just this unbelievable 10-foot tall, kind of able to leap tall buildings and do everything, when in fact wasn't the case then, and it's not the case now. They began a serious modernization effort in 2007, trotted it out in 2008, stumbled around, but learned a lot from their invasion of Georgia, and they've made significant strides in improving both doctrine, command structures, modernization of equipment, and they have very, very serious capabilities. Still, the Army, I don't want to put an exact figure on it, but over half the Army is still conscript Army. They still rely on conscripts. They will rely on conscripts for a long time. However, they have increased the percentage of professional soldiers, if you will. We saw that when they went in Crimea, where you've got non-commissioned officers with secure tactical radios. I mean, that's not it. That's not true of every unit in the Russian Army, but that's kind of new for them to do which we all do now. That's new for them. That's a different level of training and capability and mindset. The armored formation, they still have a lot of armored vehicles. You know, the T-14, I think, is the Armada. That's still a few years away, but that's not what's a worry. The T-72, latest edition of the T-72 that they use, actually is an exceptionally effective tank with active protection systems and fire control systems. It's a very, very good weapon still. The thing that has always made the Russian Army such a force is artillery and rockets, and today is no different. They have significant amount of long-range rocket and precision fires, and they're getting a chance to test it and practice it in Syria and in Donbass. The newer things are like UAVs. Frankly, I took for granted for the longest time that nobody had that but us, the coalition. Ukrainians have been on the receiving end of deadly Russian artillery and rocket fire directed by UAVs. We have provided, for example, 7 Q-36 counterfire radar, very good radar system. Russians came after that immediately. They destroyed one, got caught in the open by a UAV, and within seconds, rockets land on top of it. End of story. So that UAV and integration is something that is not just technology, it also requires practice and integration, and I think they're pretty good at that. Electronic warfare, the ability to intercept, to jam, is something that they do in a large way that the U.S. Army, anyway, has not dealt with in a long time. So that's concerning. So when you talk about deterrence and the ability to survive and fight in that kind of environment, so we're practicing that again. I mean, we're practicing camouflage, remembering how to put foliage on top of tanks and do that sort of thing. And now I care about what color our tanks are painted. 99% of the tanks in the Army are all desert tan because that's where they've been going. And so trying to get the Army to reach deeper in their pocket and paint them green again. this stuff now matters because of Russian capability. I'm certainly not the expert on Russian air and naval capability, but I was a little surprised when they launched those missiles out of the Caspian Sea into Syria. Not because that was the best weapon. In fact, that was a terrible choice for a type weapon unless your real purpose was to demonstrate we can do this too. I think that got everybody's attention. Now, the old aircraft carrier, Kuznetsov, that sailed into the Med, didn't exactly get people rushing to join the Red Navy, but the fact is they've got an aircraft carrier and they were willing to bring it out, and they will have learned a lot from that experience, I am sure. And the Russians are absolutely a learning organization, the military is, and they're adapting quickly. Almost any officer that has any hope of going anywhere had to go to Syria and has had to go into Ukraine to get their experience as well.